ماشي؟ السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم معلم إبراهيم علمنا ومفهم سليمان فهمنا. اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا ورزقا طيبا وعملا متقبلا. So we've reached now chapter number 13. This is second to last lesson, inshallah. Next week will be the last lesson, بإذن الله تعالى. And we're on chapter number 13. المعقد الثالث عشر بذل الجهد في تحفظ العلم والمذاكرة به والسؤال عنه. قال المصنف رحمه الله تعالى: إذ تلقيه عن الشيوخ لا ينفع بلا حفظ له ومذاكرة به وسؤال عنه، فهؤلاء تحقق في قلب طالب العلم تعظيمه بكمال الالتفات إليه والاشتغال به، فالحفظ خلوة بالنفس، والمذاكرة جلوس إلى القرين، والسؤال إقبال على العالم. He says here, after mentioning from the beginning of the book, we talked about cleansing the heart and having sincerity and some of the adab, having manners and choosing good friends. Now he says, look, you get some idea of seeking knowledge, and we talked about prioritizing and which how do you prioritize and the likes. Now he says, okay, this seeking of knowledge, it's not enough that you just attend the circles of knowledge alone, that you sit with the mashayikh and the teachers and the likes. It's not enough just to sit in the lessons and the circles of knowledge alone. Rather, alongside the sitting with the scholar, with the teacher, you need three other things. And these are the three things that this chapter is about. Number one is memorizing. You have to memorize. And we said before that trying to seek knowledge without no memorization is trying to seek something that is impossible. Because knowledge, ilm, there has to be some portion of memorization. And we said before that this mindset of thinking, look, my memorization is weak and I don't have good memory and I can't memorize, is a defeatist mentality that no one should have. That every single person has the ability to memorize. Even if it is half a line, even if it is one word, and you work your way up, you can become from the ulama. Okay, and we mentioned examples in that previously. So he says here, لا ينفع بلا حفظ له, that sitting with the scholars, sitting these circles of knowledge is beneficial, but it's not beneficial without memorization. You have to have a portion of memorization, number one. Number two, you have to have revision of this knowledge that you're seeking. You will not see the fruits of knowledge if you just attend. You never memorize and you never revise. You never look at your notes. You never sit with your colleague and try to revise and ask each other questions about that which you have already learnt. And number three, without asking questions about knowledge. And it is nice, mashallah, it's jayyid that you attend, but you not memorizing, you not revising, and you not asking any questions about that which you memorized or that which you studied, is gonna make this circles of knowledge that you're sitting deficient in its benefit. You're not going to be maximizing your benefit. Rather, if you're attending and you're memorizing and you're revising, that revision should bring about some questions, beneficial questions. Okay, this one and this one, this category and this category look very similar. What's the difference between this one and that one? So you put it in a question form and you get asked. Or you see something that is similar to that which you learned. Is there a difference to it? You ask. Or you learn about a word that's often used or a field and you want to know the definition for it. You ask, وهكذا. You ask questions. And so he says these three affairs, memorization, revision, and asking questions. فَهَؤُلَاءِ تُحَقِّقُ فِي قَلْبِ طَالِبِ الْعِلْمِ تَعْظِيمًا. If a student of knowledge brings these three affairs together, then he will actualize in his heart. A student of knowledge will actualize in his heart تَعْظِيمَ الْعِلْمِ, the glorification, the honor and the respect in his heart for knowledge when he does these three things. Then he says how? by a person completely turning towards and giving his full attention to knowledge. And then he says, فَالْحِفْظُ خَلْوَةٌ بِالنَّفْسِ. What is memorization? Memorization, he said, is isolation with the soul, secluding yourself with yourself, by yourself. He says memorization is isolation with the soul, meaning when you memorize, you don't need your friends around you. When you're memorizing, you don't need to be in front of the teacher when you're memorizing. When you're memorizing, you need to be secluded. If you can, you need to be looking at a wall, a plain white wall, and there's no one near you. This is the time of memorization. Just repetition. What is memorization? Memorization is repetition. The more you repeat, the stronger your memorization will be. You take a small portion and you repeat 100 times, 500 times, 1,000 times, as much as you're able to repeat, the stronger your memorization will be, the longer it will last. And that's why I believe Imam al-Shafi'i, or other than him, he would repeat something at home many times. And so a girl that was in the house as a servant or a maid or the likes, she would say, how many times are you repeating it? Even I've memorized it from the amount of times you repeated it. Why are you still repeating it? And so he said to her, okay, read it. And so she read it. Then he said, okay. He left her. Some time period went by, 2 weeks or the likes. He said, remember that thing that I was reading? Yeah, read it now. She's like, I can't. He says, I'm repeating. So that which has afflicted you, that which has come to you from forgetting, doesn't come to me. That's why I'm repeating. The more you repeat, the longer it will last. Is that clear? If you just read 5 times, 10 times, and mashallah, you got it in your head, that's now. 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month down the line, let's see how much you got done. It's as if you're memorizing something completely new. The more you repeat, the longer it will last, the easier it will be to revise, inshaAllah ta'ala. So he said, I repeat so that which has afflicted you from forgetfulness doesn't afflict me. So that's number 1. Memorization, when you're secluded, when you're in isolation. Number 2 is revision. And he says revision is sitting with a colleague. Revision is julusun ila al-qareen, sitting with a colleague, sitting with a partner of yours in seeking knowledge. That revision is best done with another person, not by yourself. You can revise by yourself, but it's best done with a colleague. And so that you get the book. So now you're studying this book, the notes that you've written, that you share it. Chapter number 1. Okay, what's this? What's the first point? What's the second point? Ask each other as questions. The extra benefits. Tell us some of the benefits that you wrote down. Okay, what about this? You ask each other questions. Question, answer. That's revision with a colleague. So you need a friend, a partner, someone else that you can revise with. That's the best way to revise. Then lastly, he says su'al. He says وَالسُّؤَالُ إِقْبَالٌ عَلَى الْعَالِمِ. And the asking of a question is turning towards a scholar. Asking is turning to a scholar, going to the most knowledgeable person that you know to ask him about this question of yours. And inshallah, a separate chapter is going to come on asking questions and the manners of asking questions. Inshallah ta'ala is to come. So memorization is seclusion, isolating yourself with your soul and repeating. And revision is done with friend, a colleague. And asking a question is asking a scholar, the most knowledgeable person that you know. Then he says وَلَمْ يَزَلِ الْعُلَمَاءُ الْأَعْلَامُ يَحُطُّونَ عَلَى الْحِفْظِ وَيَأْمُرُونَ بِهِ. He starts mentioning these 3 affairs that we mentioned in a bit more detail. So he says the first, he says that the great scholars of Islam continue to advise and command with memorization. From the beginning of time till today, they continue to advise with memorization. Even though we have books, even though we have computers, even though we have the internet, that doesn't change anything. You don't say, look, I've got all the information here, I don't need to memorize. لا. There's لا بد من الحفظ. You have to memorize. And they continue till today to advise and counsel with memorization. And so he says, the author, Sheikh Salih al-Usaymi, he said that I heard from his teacher, Sheikh Ibn Uthaymeen, rahimahullah ta'ala, and I don't think that he's obscure and unknown to any of you, the great scholar of Islam in our time. Sheikh Ibn Uthaymeen was from the teachers of Sheikh Salih al-Usaymi, and so Sheikh Usaymi heard him one day saying the following statement. He said, حفظنا قليلا وقرأنا كثيرا فانتفعنا بما حفظنا أكثر مما من انتفاعنا بما قرأنا. He said that we memorized a little and we read a lot. We read a lot of books. So we benefited from what we memorized. That little that we memorized, we benefited more from that memorization than we benefited from what we read. Benefited more from the little that I memorized than the lot that I read. And he mentions in another place that the reason why he memorized a little was he was memorizing and some teachers said to him, you don't need to memorize anymore, that's enough. Just have understanding. And he said this was not good advice. And we saw that the barakah, that the blessing that Allah Azza wa Jal put in was the little that we memorized more than the many books that we read. Why? You read a big book, 2 volumes, 3 volumes, 5 volumes, mashallah, the benefit is there with you. You might remember it when you ask the question or when that mas'ala comes up, but at the top of your head you don't have it. You remember you read it somewhere but you don't know where, what page, what volume. That's when you're just reading. That's why when you're reading it's advised even to write it down. That ilm is like an ocean, and the way to, or a prey, the way to capture it is to write it down with a pen. To write it down with a pen. So when you're reading a book, they would advise that you write notes, that you underline, that you make rumuz if you have your own like key. A star means such and such. Fa, for example, I write fa in Arabic for fa'idah, circle it, and then you go to your front, the front of your cover. So here you can write, for example, I should have brought an example. You write, for example, some of the ulama do this. They'll write a star here, they'll write the page where that benefit is. So let's say page number 6. And they'll write maybe a little intro into that benefit. And so then you fill up your book with these benefits. And so when you're looking for it later on, you just need to look at the front of your book. And then if it fills up the next page or at the back. And then when you want to find it easily, it's like a contents page for yourself. You can easily find it later on. That's from the ways to benefit from the book. وَهَكَذَا. But reading has its great immense benefit, but it's not like memorization. Especially the usul. The usul al-ilm should be memorized. So the usul, so we said a comprehensive basic book in every field. In hadith, 40 Nawawi. In usul al-hadith, Bayquniya or Nukhbat al-Fikr. In Quran, the Quran obviously, but in the science of Quran, in tajweed, وهكذا, in every field, in fiqh, in usul al-fiqh, that you memorize a basic matan in every field, an asl that you can go back to, you have it in memory. طيب? So that's memorization. Then he says, a second point was revision. He says وبالمذاكرة تدوم حياة العلم في النفس ويقوى تعلقه بها والمراد بالمذاكرة مدارسة الأقران وقد أمرنا بتعاهد القرآن الذي هو أيسر العلوم. روى البخاري ومسلم عن ابن عمر رضي الله عنهما أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إنما مثل صاحب القرآن كمثل صاحب الإبل المعلقة إن عاهد عليها أمسكها وإن أطلقها ذهبت. He says with regards to revision, and we have been commanded to constantly revise. Before that, through revision does the life of knowledge remain in the soul. And they say إن حياة العلم مذاكرته, that indeed the life, giving life to knowledge is how? Is by way of revision, by way of opening the book, going back to it, revising it. Giving life to knowledge is revising it. And fi'lan, this is reality, this is the truth. That you study a book, small or large, especially the larger books, that you might only get 1 or 2 times in your life to study it with a sheikh, bigger books that we're talking about, that you revise this with your colleagues and your contemporaries, people that are the same level as you, that you revise this with them, will bring life back to that knowledge, that you constantly read it. So revision is the way that knowledge remains in the soul and its connection to it grows. And the intent with revision here is to study with your colleagues. And this is especially important for the student who has done bigger books. It is important when you're doing basic books as well. It's easy to get through, and you could do that yourself sometimes. Let's say a small book, Usul al-Thalatha, you could revise it by yourself. When you get to bigger books, let's say you did Ma'arij al-Qubul, or a book in Hadith, or Tadrib al-Rawi, or Sahih Muslim, you studied it, or a big fiqh book, 2 volumes, 3 volumes. To read it by yourself and revise it, it's gonna take a lot more effort and the likes. But doing it with a colleague, revising with a colleague, will give life to it, and it makes it easier and enjoyable. وهكذا. The ulama, and they are ulama. Some of them I heard narrated from Sheikh Abdul Salam al-Shuway'ir, that he says that every single year, once a year, he has to finish a major book in fiqh. One of the greater books in fiqh he has to finish. Every year he has to finish a major book. If he doesn't, he said, I would forget this knowledge. That's how the ulama are. So how about us? And then he says, we have been commanded to make constant revision of the Quran, and it is the easiest of knowledge. أليس كذلك? The Quran is the easiest of knowledge. And we've been commanded to constantly revise it, constantly check upon it. The Prophet ﷺ, he says in the hadith here, that indeed the example of the companion of the Quran is the example of a tied camel. If he repeatedly binds her, the camel, he controls it, and if he lets go, she will leave. Yani, that the camel, if it's tied up, if you don't constantly check on it, it's going to try to leave. If you don't check on it and you bind it, make sure it's strong and firm, the rope, you just let go of it, it will keep trying to go up until it runs away. But if you keep checking on it, keep making sure that it's binded, that the rope is secured, then the camel will not leave. Likewise, Prophet ﷺ, he gave that metaphor to the Quran. And that's why even Huffaz, that they're great memorizers of the Quran. For example, A'immat al-Haramain, Mecca and Medina, they read the Quran, they lead the Salah every day, they lead it every Taraweeh. But even then, they have to constantly revise. And some of the brothers, when they came to Medina last year, some brothers came from abroad for the first time, prayed Taraweeh in Medina. They saw the Imam making mistakes. They're like, oh, he's human. We thought they never make mistakes. One of the Imams made a lot of mistakes, and that goes to show you no one's perfect, and that everyone needs to constantly revise. It doesn't matter what their level is, it doesn't matter what their position is. Is that clear? Ibn Abd al-Barr, he says in his book التمهيد: وإذا كان القرآن الميسر للذكر كالإبل المعلقة من تعاهدها أمسكها فكيف بسائر العلوم. He says, Ibn Abd al-Barr, from the great scholars who died in the year 463, he says in his book التمهيد: so if the Quran, which has been made easy for remembrance, is like a tied camel, whoever checks upon it preserves it, then how about the rest of the fields of knowledge? How about the rest of the fields of knowledge, the different sciences? They're not as easy as the Quran. They likewise deserve to be revised, أليس كذلك? Constantly checked upon, otherwise they will leave min bab awla. Then he says, lastly, asking questions. He says, and by asking about knowledge, you will unlock its treasures. For indeed, a good question is half of knowledge. They say that a good su'al is nisful ilm. Asking a good beneficial question is half of knowledge. The other half is the answer. And those books written about asked questions, like Masail Imam Ahmed, and that which has been reported from him, is a clear proof for the great benefit of questions. Meaning, the Masail of Imam Ahmed were questions, Masail, issues, different issues that were brought to him. What do you say, Imam Ahmed, about such and such issue? What do you say about such and such issue? And he would give his answer. And so someone compiled all these answers into a book, and we still benefit from it today. So he says, look how the benefit of questions, how far reaching and how the benefits of it is muta'addi, it spreads far and wide. Likewise, how many books do we have today authored because of a question, a beneficial question someone asked? And we've mentioned this before. Who can mention to me a book that's been authored because of someone asking a question? The disease and the cure. عقيدة الواسطية. المراكشية. عقيدة الواسطية. Who else?
All of Ibn Taymiyyah's books.
Most of Ibn Taymiyyah's books. أحسنت. Who else? Majmu' is just a compilation, but most of them are fatawa anyway. Yeah. Many books. Sahih Muslim. A person asked him to bring the hadith together to make it easy for him. Umdat al-Ahkam. Many of the books, Arba'in al-Mundhiri that we did, many of the books were written because someone requested it, someone asked, and we benefit from it today. That questioner, inshallah ta'ala, reaps the reward of everyone that reads that book that was authored because of his question. Likewise, in our times, we have Shaykh ibn Uthaymin, questions that were asked to him over the phone, questions that were asked to him while he's in the car, questions that are asked to him from what do you call it, aqalliyat in English, communities, Muslim communities, minority Muslim communities in non-Muslim lands. He was asked questions from minority Muslim communities, like let's say in UK or the West or different places that is a non-Muslim land where Muslims are minority compared to the rest of the people. Questions that they gave, they asked Shaykh ibn Uthaymin, and his answers is authored in a book, volumes printed. Shaykh al-Albani rahimahullah ta'ala, his silsila Huda wa Nur, I believe, is called, the audios, recordings of the sittings of Shaykh al-Albani, all of it being question and answers. All of it was question and answers. So the immense benefit of question, a beneficial question, is clear to see, and its fruits last and extend long after a person's life. If a person has sincerity, and the question is beneficial. Then he says, وهذه المعاني الثلاثة للعلم بمنزلة الغرس للشجر وسقيه وتنميته بما يحفظ قوته ويدفع آفته فالحفظ غرس العلم والمذاكرة سقيه والسؤال عنه تنميته. He says that, and the similitude for these three meanings in knowledge, he gives a metaphor for these three affairs: the asking, the revision, the memorization, the revision, and the asking of the questions. He says is similar to the planting of a tree. So you have the planting of it, watering that tree, and then cultivating and looking after that tree. So he says memorizing is the planting of knowledge, and revision is the watering of that knowledge, and asking about it is the cultivation of it, making it stronger, protecting it from the things that will harm it. So that's the metaphor that he gave, and a beautiful, nice metaphor. طيب, we go to the next chapter. He says, chapter number 14, المعقد الرابع عشر إكرام أهل العلم وتوقيرهم إن فضل العلماء عظيم ومنصبهم منصب جليل لأنهم آباء الروح فالشيخ أب للروح كما أن الوالد أب للجسد فالاعتراف بفضل المعلمين حق واجب. He says, honoring the scholars and respecting them. He says that indeed the virtues of the scholars in Islam is great, and their station is high because they are the fathers of the soul. Just like he says, indeed the Shaykh is the father of the soul, just like the parent is the father of the body. Your biological father, that's the reason for your existence. He's the father of your body, and you have a lineage with him. You take his father's name, you take your father's name, and he takes his father's name. وهكذا, you have a lineage. Likewise, the student, when it comes to the soul, that which rectifies the soul with the light of revelation, the Quran and the Sunnah, then the father in that regard is the teacher and the scholar. And this father of the soul also has a lineage. Also has a lineage that goes up. That lineage of ilm. That he took from his teacher and his teacher took from his teacher, going all the way as a silsila chain back to the Sahaba who took directly from the Prophet ﷺ. So, what do you call it in English? Up to this. Hierarchy, yeah? Hierarchy of forefathers. Huh? Lineage is more clear, inshallah. So, just like you have that for your father, and that's what your tribe is, and that's where your asl goes back to, then likewise, ilm has a lineage that it goes back to. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, إِنَّ الْأَنْبِيَاءَ لَمْ يُوَرِّثُوا دِينَارًا وَلَا دِرْهَمًا, that the prophets did not leave behind a dinar or dirham, wealth, to be inherited. وَلَكِنْ وَرَّثُوا الْعِلْمَ فَمَنْ أَخَذَ بِهِ أَخَذَ بِحَظٍ وَافِرٍ. Whoever takes that inheritance of knowledge, the revelation of the Quran and the Sunnah, then he has taken a mighty portion. And Abu Hurairah one time, he saw some of the people always in the marketplace after the Prophet ﷺ passed away. And so he said to them, you guys are here squandering in the supermarket every day, and the inheritance of the Prophet ﷺ is being given out in the masjid. They said, inheritance? And his clothes, maybe his vessels, maybe his left things that he left behind. So they rushed to the masjid. They all looked. They came back. They said, what are you talking about, Abu Hurairah? We didn't see nothing being given out. No clothes, no vessel, no nothing. What are you talking about? He goes, what did he see? They said, we saw a circle of knowledge. We saw a Quran halqa. We saw this. We saw that. He goes, that is the inheritance of the Prophet ﷺ being given out. Where's your portion of it? How much of it do you take? So that is the inheritance of the Prophet ﷺ, this knowledge. And so he says, going back here, he says, indeed the Shaykh is the father of the soul, just like the parent is the father of the body. So acknowledging the virtue of the teachers is a mandatory right. He says that this point was extrapolated from the Quran by a scholar called Mahamed ibn Ali, who said, if a person studies with a scholar and takes benefits from him, then he is to him a servant. He says that Allah Azza wa Jal, he said in Surah Al-Kahf, وَإِذْ قَالَ مُوسَى لِفَتَاهِ, and mention when Musa said to his servant. And so the ulama, they say, that servant was Yusha ibn Nun, and he was not a servant of Musa alayhi salam. In reality, he wasn't a servant of him. He was only a student of him and a believer. But Allah Azza wa Jal referred to him as a servant for that reason. This was extrapolated by one of the scholars. Then he says, وَقَدْ أَمَرَ الشَّرْعُ بِرِعَايَةِ حَقِّ الْعُلَمَاءِ إكراما لهم وتوقيرا وإعزازا. فروى أحمد في المسند عن عبادة بن صامت رضي الله عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال ليس من أمتي من لم يجل كبيرنا ويرحم صغيرنا ويعرف لعالمنا حقه. He says that the legislation, the sharia of Allah Azza wa Jal instructs us to preserve the rights of the scholars, to honor them, to hold them in high value and to respect them. And he mentions a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, he says, لَيْسَ مِنْ أُمَّتِي, the one who does not honor his elder and does not have mercy upon the younger, and he does not know or acknowledge for the scholar his due right, then he is not from my nation. He is not from my ummah, he is not from my nation. The one who does not respect his older, have mercy upon his younger, and acknowledge the due rights that the scholars have. So how about if that scholar is older as well, and it's combined two things? And that's the majority of the ulama. That he's in his 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s or 100. And that you're seeking knowledge with him at this age. He's older than you. And he's a scholar. طيب, he says Ibn Hazm reported an ijma' consensus in honoring and venerating and respecting the scholars. Then he says فَمِنَ الْأَدَبِ اللَّازِمِ, he mentions some examples of good manners. He says فَمِنَ الْأَدَبِ اللَّازِمِ لِلشَّيْخِ على المتعلم مما يدخل تحت هذا الأصل التواضع له والإقبال عليه وعدم الالتفات عنه ومراعاة أدب الحديث معه وإذا حدث عنه عظمه من غير غلو بل ينزله منزلته لئلا يشينه من حيث أراد أن يمدحه وليشكر تعليمه ويدعو له ولا يظهر الاستغناء عنه ولا يؤذيه بقول أو فعل وليتلطف في تنبيهه على خطئه إذا وقعت منه زلة. He mentions some of the manners that is befitting that a student of knowledge should have with regards to his teacher. He says that you should be humble to the teacher, to him. And that means you don't show takabbur, you don't show arrogance and that you know already what he's teaching you. Just like we benefit this from the hadith of Jibreel alayhi salam, who asked about questions that he already knew about. But even with that being the case, he came with the best of his clothes. He sat close to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, humbly in front of him, putting his knee next to his knee and his thighs under the thighs of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then he asked him, "Oh Muhammad, tell me about Islam." He didn't say, "Oh, I've already come to know, and Allah Azza wa Jal already told me, but I just want to ask you anyway." And so many people, they ask like this, they know something, they've read a little bit before, so they come to a sheikh and they say, "Sheikh, what do you think about such and such?" I already know the answer because I asked 2 other sheikhs before you, but I just want your opinion. Go ahead, sheikh. That's not good manners. That's not from the manners. Because you're showing that, look, I don't need your answer really, but I'll give you a chance. Go ahead, shoot your shot. And that's from bad manners. So, but what you should do is be humble, even if you know the answer already, and you're asking for a benefit, you need it, or someone else there needs it. Ask in a way as if you don't know completely, like Jibreel alayhi salam. So be humble, which comes under the principle. He says is that you, number 1 is that you're humble to him. Number 2, that you give your full attention, that you do not turn away from him. And this is from the bad manners that takes place sometimes with a student when he's sitting in front of the teacher's talking, and he's like this in the lesson, looking up, goes on the phone, then he sits for a little bit, goes on the phone again. I'm not talking about you, Talha, don't worry. Take your notes, and you as well. No, but I'm saying someone that is not giving attention to the teacher at all, they're turning away, they're busy with something else. This is from the bad manners. So, you should give your full attention, you should not turn away from him. And then you observe good manners, general good manners when you're talking to him. That you don't talk to him and then you see someone else there, you're like, "Catch you later, bro." That's it, that one there. And then, you wouldn't do that with if someone that was important to you, like we don't have no examples today, we don't want to mention Salih today, but anyone that you saw that was important to you, someone that was famous or someone like that, and they were talking to you out of everyone, whilst they're talking to you, would you go and, 1 second, just got to pick up the phone? You wouldn't do that. So, min bab awla, this alim that's carrying this knowledge that you're benefiting from in your akhirah before the dunya, should observe some manners with him. Okay? So general manners when you're speaking to him. If he speaks, you hold him in high esteem, but do not go into extremism with him. So he speaks, you listen attentively, and you give him that respect and honor that he deserves, without going into ghulu, without going into extremism beyond bounds, and that can occur sometimes. So he warns you from that. Then he says, rather you place him in his deserved station. So in the middle, you don't raise him too high to the extent that you might fall into something haram, or you might go into ghulu, and you might do put yourself in a humiliating position. And at the same time, you don't raise him too high, you don't lower him. Rather, you put him in his position that Allah Azza wa Jal gave him. He's a scholar, so you don't raise him to the extent of being a prophet or the likes. And this is what some people do, sadly. They will give the huquq of the Prophet ﷺ to a scholar. That's not his station. Just like some people will give the rights of Allah to the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ has a high station, but we don't give the right of Allah to the Prophet ﷺ. Likewise, the Prophet ﷺ has a high station. We don't give the rights of the Prophet ﷺ to a scholar. وهكذا. So we give everyone their due right, without lowering them, without putting them higher. Then he says, so rather you place him in his deserved position. Why? Or station. So he says, so as not to tarnish him and ruin his image. Tarnish him and his image whilst trying to praise him. And this occurs many times. That someone tries to praise someone that they respect from the ulama, and they think that they're praising him, but in fact they're ruining his image. They say, oh, he's got the knowledge of the unseen, and he controls the whole earth and the heavens, and everything is in his hand. And you gave him some of the rights of Allah. You ruined his image. وهكذا. Instead, you thank him and you make supplication for him. It's enough that you say Jazakallah khair and you make dua. That you make dua for the teacher and the scholar. And this is what the ulama love. That you don't, he's going to mention it, I think, as well, is that you don't overcrowd the teacher and the shaykh all the time and busy them and call them 24/7 on the phone every day. I have a question every day, I have a question every day, I have a question. And you bother the shaykh. The shaykh at the end of the day is a human being. Sah wala la. Or to always say, every day, you're the reason why Allah Azza wa Jal guided me, thank you, every single day. And this is your right upon. Yani, it can become burdensome to do that. He does it, you do it, he does it, he does it, he does it, everyone does it every single day. Yani, it's enough, make dua for him. Say Jazakallah khair. That's enough. And that's what many of our teachers would say, just make dua for him, Jazakallah khair. They said the connection between us is this knowledge, nothing else. If you continue this bond, relation afterward, this is from your goodness, but it's nothing lazim. The least that your shaykh deserves is that you make dua for him, and that's enough. As for this celebrity culture, you follow the shaykh wherever he goes, crowd him, take pictures with him every time, and يعني is من الأشياء التي يعني it can put off the teacher. And you'll be doing more harm than good. Ibn Mas'ud, he said that he saw some people following someone, and he said, do not do this. Why? Because number one, it's a humiliation for the one that is following him. You're humiliating yourself by following someone else. Number two, it's fitnah, it's a trial, it's a test for the one that you're following. Imagine he looks behind, and that happened one time, we were with a shaykh, and all the students followed him afterwards. And I guess every other day he didn't used to see how many people were following him because he's at the front. But one day, there must have been construction or somewhere, so we had to go around, and he looked back and he saw how many people were following. So he said it in the next lesson, he said it to the students, he said, do not follow me. Jazakumullah khair. If you have a question, ask now. The lesson, after the lesson, while he's in the masjid, but after the masjid, please don't follow me, because Ibn Mas'ud, he said, it's a humiliation for the one following, and it's a trial and it's a test for the one that's being followed. Shaitan can get into his head. You want to benefit him, you don't want to ruin the person. And we're all human beings at the end of the day. Then he says, you do not make yourself appear like someone who is not in need of him, as we said, like acting arrogantly. You do not harm him with your speech or your actions. You should be gentle with him if you correct him in a mistake that he falls into. And so see, these are some of the adab that he mentions, nice adab that he mentions, that's upon befitting for the student to have when it comes to his teacher. Then he goes on to mention, how do you treat a scholar and a teacher if he falls into a mistake? And this is haqiqatan a very important mas'ala that many people fall into a mistake with regards to how to deal with it and how to respond and react and the likes. Okay, so now scholars are not they're not anbiya, they're not ma'sumin. They can fall into mistakes, صح. But how do you deal with the mistakes? So he mentions 6 affairs. He says it's befitting to mention here quite briefly to know what is obligatory with regards to the scholar if he falls into a mistake, and it is 6 affairs and he lists them. Bear in mind, here he's talking about, of course, the scholar that is upon the aqidah of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah. He's not talking about somebody that's an innovator, that might be a scholar and the likes. That's not here. No, he's not talking about that right now. He's talking about someone that's from the ulama Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah. His creed is upright, but then he fell into a mistake. How do you treat that scholar? He says, number 1, he says verifying if this error actually occurred from him. Double checking. Did this error actually occur from the teacher? Did he actually utter this? Did he actually say this or write this? Is this actually true that he did it? Yes or no? Double check. Many a times, turns out to be a lie, turns out to be a rumor, turns out he never said that, turns out he said something similar to it, but it wasn't that thing. And that one person that narrated it, he misheard. So double check, did he say it? Did it actually occur from him? If he didn't, khalas, you don't even need to go to the other 5 steps because it's not even thabit an. طيب. Number 2, he actually did say it. It did actually come from him. Verifying that it is in fact a mistake. That it's actually a mistake. Double checking. Because many people, they hear something and because of his misunderstanding in his head or his low level of knowledge, he thinks that it's a mistake. He heard this thing, yes, he said it, but there's nothing wrong with the statement. This student, this low student, or a person that misunderstood it, the problem is with him. And the Arab, they say, وَكَمْ عَائِبًا قَوْلًا صَحِيحًا وَآفَتُهُ الْفَهْمُ السَّقِيمِ. How many times someone, they dispraise a statement. They say, oh, what a rubbish statement. How evil is this statement? Oh, kada. And the issue is, آفَتُهُ مِنَ الْفَهْمِ السَّقِيمِ, is from his bad understanding. He didn't have good understanding of it. He misunderstood. It's in his head. Probably is not with the Shaykh and what he said. So verifying that this is actually a mistake. And the Shaykh, he says, this is the role of the firmly grounded scholars, so they are asked about it. It's not for me and you to say, yeah, this thing is actually good and not good. How are you supposed to know that if you're a beginner student of knowledge? I mean, Bab Ola, you shouldn't be busying yourself with going and double checking because this is a bit above your level. This is something that the ulama do. And if it's needed that they're gone, that you go to them and then you ask them about it. So verifying if this thing is actually first step is verifying if he said it. He did say it, okay. Verifying, is it actually a mistake? Is there a problem with it? Okay, if there isn't, then we stop there, khalas. If you don't, then we go to the next one. So third one is now, he did say it. It is actually a wrong statement. It's an error, it's a mistake. Number 3, what's the first thing you do? The first thing is you do not follow him in that mistake. Why? Because he's a scholar and he's a human being. It's possible that he makes a mistake. Everyone can make a mistake. And if someone makes a mistake, the first thing you do is you don't follow them in that mistake. Sadly, some people, they gave some of the rights of the Prophet to some of the scholars where we have to unrestrictedly obey the Prophet ﷺ. Sah? The Prophet ﷺ did something or commanded us to do something. No ifs, no buts, we do it. أليس كذلك? If a scholar said something, but this statement actually came wrong, do we say, no, he's a scholar, I still have to do it? Because he's not the Prophet ﷺ. The only one we're commanded to unrestrictedly follow is the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Even if he's the greatest scholar alive, we respect him, we honor him, but if he falls to a mistake, we do not blindly follow him in that mistake. Is that clear? And that breaks her. So first is double checking, did he say it? Number two, double checking this thing that he said, is it a mistake or not a mistake? Okay, now we know he did say it, now it is a mistake. The first thing you do, number three, is you don't follow him in that. And this is also something that rebuts the affair of blind following. That you just blind follow everything that your Shaykh said, the Maulana said, the Bir said, the Ustad said, the Sida said, Sida Hassan. Wherever the Shaykh, the person that is Mu'azzam, the teacher, whatever he said, some people they follow. Even if it goes against directly, sarahatan, either the Quran or the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And they say, no, the Shaykh knows better. Okay? So what do we say? We don't follow any Shaykh if it goes against the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that's number three, not following him in that.
For example, let's say like, you know how you mentioned like only the scholars, they may point out the mistakes of other scholars. What would a layman do? Like how would he deduce what's a mistake and what's not? If he's a beginner student knowledge or a layman?
First of all, if he's in the beginning, he shouldn't get involved in that anyway. Seek knowledge. But if you've come to a level where you recognize it is, what are the steps that you take?
Sorry?
If you get to a stage, a level, where you recognize this is a mistake, the ulama, they've pointed it out, it happened maybe, let's say 50 years ago, how do you deal with it? Do you just cut the Shaykh off, completely abandon him, start cursing him? Or the other side, pretend he doesn't exist, and you know what, actually you follow him in that mistake? How do you react? We say, number one, after double checking, number one, we don't follow him in that. That's number one, okay? Don't follow him in that. Number two, so that's number three. Number four, making excuses for him with an acceptable interpretation. Making an acceptable interpretation if it's possible. Perhaps the Shaykh, it was a slip of the tongue. Perhaps he didn't mean that. Perhaps it was sahu. Perhaps it was by accident. Perhaps he meant this other issue. Perhaps the hadith never reached him. Perhaps. As long as it's an acceptable interpretation. Trying to make excuse for him, whilst not following him in that mistake. Number five, advising him with gentleness and discreetly in private, not with harshness nor to shame him. And that is because anyone that's got a sane mind, if you want to advise someone, you don't do so by shouting at them, screaming at them, being harsh with them, publicly shaming them. So and so made a mistake. This is your teacher, you studied with him for 10 years, he made a mistake, you go on YouTube, you write the mistake of Sheikh Fulan, and I'm going to correct it. Akhi, that's not the way you fix it. He's your Sheikh, 10 years you study with him, go sit with him privately, he knows you know him, you respect him, kada. If he doesn't live the same land as you, call him. If you live the same land, go sit with him, have tea with him, then show him, look, the books, Sheikh, this mas'ala, the ulama said so and so. Perhaps you meant such and such. Did you mean, Sheikh, you say, oh no, did I say that? I said that. Subhanallah, la, I don't know why I said that. Astaghfirullah wa atubu ilayk. Done. But you go on YouTube, public, shaming. ما أحد يقبل هذا. How would you treat someone how you want to be treated? If you made a mistake, and it's possible all of us can make a mistake, how would you want the people to treat you? طيب. Sixthly, and this is probably one of the most important points, is, by the way, advising is not for everyone. It's not for everyone. It's either the students of knowledge that have a close relationship with the teacher or other scholars and the likes. Okay? It's not for every Tom, Dick and Harry, Bakr, Amr, Zayd to say, yeah, that Sheikh made a mistake, I'm going Umrah to go and advise that Sheikh. He's going to see a random guy he's never seen before, telling him, Sheikh, you said such and such. It's not your role. It's not for you. Not every maqam, and there's people for every scenario and situation. Sixthly, number 6, preserving his honor. so that his high station is not squandered in the hearts of the Muslims. And this is one of the most important points. Those 2 points of not following him, and number 6 here, that you don't ruin his image and his high station in the hearts of the Muslims. Why? A number of reasons. Number 1, he's a scholar from Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Number 2, he made a mistake. Anyone can make a mistake. And tomorrow, if he says, Astaghfirullah wa atubu ilayk, I made a mistake, but you ruined his station in the hearts of the ammatin nas, the general people, they're not just going to fix their hearts with him. If he dies, he dies. His gun is gone. What do they say? It's like trust is like paper. What do they say? If you scrunch it up, you can't make it straight again. Sah? Can't iron paper. Once it's scrunched, it can never be straight again. You ruined his station in the eyes of the general folk, the Muslims. They're never going to go ask him fatwa again. You have someone like Sheikh Fawzan alive today, high in the hearts of every Muslim that knows about him, young or old, close or far, student or a ammi, general folk. He falls into a mistake. And yes, he's a scholar, he can make a mistake. But then you start talking about his mistake as if he became a kafir. How could he say this? That guy. He starts saying X, Y, and Z in front of everyone, in front of the general folk. And then now, khalas, his station in the hearts of the Muslims is being dropped. Tomorrow, the Shaykh clarifies and he says, that mistake was a mistake, astaghfirullah wa atubu ilayk. Do you think people are going to go back to him to ask him fatwa, to go to listen to his lessons, to benefit from him? No, khalas, people, isn't it that guy that did that big mistake that you were talking about yesterday? That's all they're going to remember. Is that clear? Anyone can make a mistake. Well, everyone makes a mistake. How do you deal with them? The main 2 here is, don't follow them in that mistake. And number 2, don't ruin their station. So that's why the ulama say, if anyone makes a mistake, doesn't matter who it is, the mistake is clarified. But the honor of that scholar is kept intact, is not ruined. Because this is from the ulama Ahlul Sunnah at the end of the day.
Does that apply to brothers that make videos of like refutations of like students of knowledge and things of the like? Because it's been happening like recently.
For many years. So now, similar. Now, if a person does refutation of the ulama of the ummah that are known, Shaykh Fawzan and other than Shaykh Fawzan that are well known, and he's a student of knowledge and he's translating into the English language, for example, speaking about the ulama day and night from Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, ruining their reputation and their name with the people. Sah wala la? Like some guy, he talked about Shaykh al-Albani, made a whole video talking about Shaykh al-Albani. Look at this fatwa that he made, is a mistake and kada. But the way he talked about it, he's ruining the image of Shaykh al-Albani in the eyes of the Muslims. All of the Muslims, qatibatan, in every land, if they know Shaykh al-Albani, they hold him in a high regard from the greatest of the scholars of this time. He made one fatwa, he made a mistake, and you put him taht al-ard, underneath the ground. That's wrong. And 9 times out of 10, the people that are talking like this, they are ignorant people that never studied anywhere. He studied here in some university in Peterborough, Oxfam, ومدري إيش. And تتكلم في علماء الأمة, and he speaks about the scholars of the Ummah. It's wrong. Number 2, even if it was a mistake and it was a wrong fatwa, then how do you deal with a sheikh? A scholar at that station that's put his 70, 80, 90 years of his life in service of the religion, to teach the people, to bring the sunnah closer to the people. That you squander his name like that in front of the people. Like tomorrow, the person that's talking like this, he sees a fatwa of the sheikh that says, actually he clarified this, it's too late now, khalas. No one wants to listen to Shaykh al-Albani tomorrow. Is that clear? So yes, it applies to them. Any other questions? Then he says, so that's that clear? You okay? Yes. So that's 6 ways to deal with them. Then he says, he rounds this chapter by saying, ومما يحذر منه مما يتصل بتوقير العلماء ما صورته التوقير ومآله الإهانة والتحقير كالازدحام على العالم والتضييق عليه وإلجائه إلى أعسر السبل. He says, to round off this chapter, he says, and from those things that should be warned against, which is connected to honoring the scholars, is that which outwardly looks like respect and honoring, outwardly looks like veneration, but in reality it leads to humiliation and degrading, like overcrowding the scholar, doing izdiham of the scholar, confining him and forcing him to tread the most difficult paths. Especially in some countries, when they're walking outside, the roads are not big, and it looks like alleyways and the likes, and there's 20 people following the sheikh, and then they force the sheikh, because they're trying to go in, and they force the sheikh to go, maybe skirmish off the wall. You're humiliating the sheikh. You look like you're venerating the sheikh for following him and asking questions, but in reality you're humiliating the sheikh, forcing him to tread the most difficult paths whilst walking alongside him. And this is a reality, and this still exists till today. If you have a question, ask the sheikh. If you don't have a question, don't just follow. The mashayikh, they don't like it. It's troubling. It's not nice. You only go if you have a question. طيب, next chapter. He says, المعقد الخامس عشر رد مشكله إلى أهله. He says, فالمعظم للعلم يعول على دهاقنته والجهابذة من أهله لحل مشكلاته ولا يعرض نفسه لما لا تطيق خوفا من القول على الله بلا علم والافتراء على الدين فهو يخاف سخطة الرحمن قبل أن يخاف صوت السلطان فإن العلماء بعلم تكلموا وببصر نافذ سكتوا فإن تكلموا في مشكل فتكلم بكلامهم وإن سكتوا عنه فليسعك ما وسعهم. He says, returning the problematic affairs to its rightful people. The problematic affairs, the mu'dhilat, those things that are major, to the correct people. Not every Bakr, Amr, Zayd talks about it. My opinion is that. What's your opinion? Have a discussion over it on Twitter Space, and everybody listens. What do they call it? Clubhouse. And everyone has their opinion. Rather, the one who magnifies knowledge, the one who has respect and veneration of ilm, he relies upon the experts and the masters of these, the ilm al-sharia, of the religion of Allah Azza wa Jal, to solve those problems that arise. The one that magnifies knowledge, he does not burden his soul more than it can bear. Fearing, why? Not because he's weak, not because he fears the people who say he has no knowledge. No, rather because he fears about speaking about the religion of Allah without no knowledge, and that he fabricates and he makes a lie about the religion of Allah. Because when you say this is halal and this is haram, from those new things that have arisen, problematic affairs, things that are not clear, and you say, oh no, this is haram, this is halal, then you're saying that Allah Azza wa Jal made this thing halal, or Allah Azza wa Jal made this thing haram. And if you're doing this without knowledge, you're lying upon the religion. And so it's something dangerous. So you take a step back, relax, leave it for the experts, the ulama that are experts in these fields, to deal with these problematic major affairs. And don't burden your soul more than it can bear. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. And Allah Azza wa Jal did not burden you to speak about the nawazil, the major affairs the calamities that take place in this ummah. Rather, everyone has a position to play, and this position is for the major scholars to deal with, the ulama that are rasikhin, firmly grounded. So he says that the scholars and the one that magnifies knowledge, he fears the anger of Ar-Rahman, he fears the wrath of Ar-Rahman more than he fears the stick of the sultan, the ruler. The ulama, from from time to time and place to place, it's possible, throughout history it's occurred, it's possible that a ruler has a certain agenda that he's pushing. Like the mihna that happened, the fitna of the Quran that happened in the time of Imam Ahmed. That the ruler got affected by a doubt and an innovation, and he had a certain agenda that he was pushing and forcing everyone to adopt it. And so the ulama, if a person's life is underlined, then that's something else, but the ulama have a role to play. And as long as they have a choice in the matter and they don't fear their death, being killed, then they fear the wrath of Ar-Rahman. They fear the anger of Allah Azza wa Jal and His punishment more than the stick, more than the imprisonment of the ruler. And that's why you have Imam Ahmed, who it was allowed for him to say that which he did not believe regarding the Quran, because people got killed for it. There's other ulama that got killed if they didn't say what the ruler wanted them to say. But Imam Ahmed saw the bigger picture and he said, look, if I fold, if I give in and everyone takes me as an example, then it can reach to a stage where the truth becomes mixed with falsehood. No one actually realizes what the truth is anymore. So he took an L for the team, took an L for the whole ummah. He got beat, he got lashed, he got imprisoned, got moved from prison to prison, because he wouldn't give into what the ruler wanted him to say, that the Quran is created. He got imprisoned, he got moved from prison to prison, he got lashed, so much so that when the fitna finished, he was taken to a surgeon and he said, I've seen many people lashed before, criminals lashed before, but I've never seen anybody lashed as much as this. And he had to give him surgery and in those times what they had, and stitches and the likes. Why? Because he fears the wrath of Ar-Rahman and the loss of the religion and the truth more than the stick of the Sultan. And this occurs till today, that ulama al-kibar, Shaykh al-Albani, Shaykh Muqbil, Shaykh bin Baz, Shaykh Fawzan, Shaykh Abdul Muhsin Abbad, and the kibar ulama, that they will say the truth even if it goes against them in something of the dunya. Okay, that's the asl. If a person fears that they're going to be killed or the likes, then they might be quiet from it because of the greater harm, but they will never go out of their way to push something that is haram, something that changes the religion of Allah knowingly, freely, voluntarily. Okay? طيب. He says, for indeed the scholars speak with knowledge, and with clear-sightedness they keep quiet. فَبِعِلْمٍ تَكَلَّمُوا. If they speak about an arising problem, what's upon us? Speak with their speech. If a new arising problem occurs, or something new that you've never heard about, even if it's from the dunya affairs that the hukm al-shar'i relates to, for example, forex trade, for example, and the ulama are asked about it, if they're quiet, stay quiet about it, wait until it becomes more clear. If they speak, speak with their speech. Al-ulama al-mawfuqun that are known, not Bakr, Tom, Dick and Harry and me and you, come let's go to, inshallah, we go to Birmingham City Council, we make our own fiqh shura, and we say we are the fiqh council of Birmingham and we declared it to be halal. La, the ulama that are known for years of service, 30, 40, 50, 60 years of ilm, and their silsila of who they took for, and their mirath of ilm is well known. That we go back to them. If they speak about an arising problem, we speak with their speech. And if they're quiet about something, then we remain quiet about it. And sadly, the problematic affairs is something that is for the people that are firmly grounded. But every nobody is attracted to it. Every single person is attracted to speak about these problematic affairs, nawazil, controversial affairs, things that are problematic, things that are not clear. Everyone wants to get involved. But the clear-cut things, the memorization of the Quran, seeking the basics of the knowledge of how to pray, how to fast, how to do hajj, how to do zakah, the basics of your religion, no one's interested. And this is clearly shown in any country in the world, where whether it's ulama or teachers that teach, whether it's in English, Chinese, Spanish, Arabic, whatever language it is, if you see a beneficial lesson, just go on YouTube. It's a beneficial lesson by a big sheikh. How many views? 200, 300, 400, 500, 600. Problematic affair, big debate between these two people, million views. So and so is being hosted by so and so to talk about this big rising issue, million views. These two people are fighting each other, million views. This new affair, what's the hukm al-shari on it, million views. What's the aqidah of Imam al-Nawawi, million views. They love problematic affairs. لعل هذا من تلبيس إبليس. This is from the beautification of the shaitan, that it distracts you from that which is more important to something less important. The asl is, there's enough for you to be busy with, there's enough for you to worry about, than to only be looking at these controversial affairs, and this one fought this one, what did this one say about this one, and what's the fatwa on this one, and it's something that doesn't even concern you, to be honest with you. If you was to never read about it and know about it, it would not harm you in your dunya and your akhirah. But this is the world that we live in today, sadly. And from the hardest, he says, and from the hardest of the problems that arise, look how he says, from the hardest of the problems that arise is the fitan, the trials and tribulations that take place, and the nawazil, the incidents and new calamities that take place upon the ummah, that always renew, tajaddad, always renews and becomes more sophisticated. And then he says, and those that are saved from this fire of fitan are those that return to the scholars and stick to their statements. You have many callers today to abandon the scholars. They don't know what they're talking about. They don't know what they're doing. Their head is stuck in the sand. They don't know what's going on. They don't know fiqh al-waqi'. They don't know reality. They don't know kada. Look, the ulama, the whole reason why we're commanded to go back to them in these problematic, sophisticated, renewing affairs is because they've got the asl of the answer in the sharia. They've got the answer of the Quran and the Sunnah that they've studied for 50, 60, 70 years. And so these affairs, with all the knowledge that they're going to have, the usul that they're going to have, they're going to be able to reach and come to a conclusion. But أنت يا مسكين ما عندك شيء. You don't have no asl in the Quran and the Sunnah, in the Sharia. But you're going to be the answer to the fitna. You curse the ulama and insult them that they don't know nothing. But man ant, what alternative do you have? Go look at the alternative that they have. Some guy that sings and dances with Sufis, he's the alternative. Some guy that the people that يعني حالهم is مؤسفة جدا, he's the alternative. أتستبدلون الذي هو أدنى بالذي هو خير. Are you going to change that which is better for that which is less? You're going to find your problem there, your solution there? Aqlan, it doesn't make sense. Those people that make a mockery of the scholars, umuman, all of the scholars of the ummah, and make them seem worthless and try to disconnect the people from them, and then call to themselves or call to alternatives that are haqiqatan, that have no clue of the sharia and the usul and the foundations of the Quran and the Sunnah. He says, those that are saved from the fire of fitan are those that return to the scholars and stick to their statements. And if some of their speech becomes unclear to them, some of the speech is unclear for you, then he should have good thoughts of them. And if the scholars differ, he takes the statement of the Jumhur. The scholars differ in affair, difference of opinion. Then for you, safety is for now, is that you follow the majority of the scholars. 10 scholars said this, 1 scholar said this. For you, for now, if you don't have the tools to separate, you just it's better to stick to those 10 scholars of the ulama. The overwhelming majority and the heads of those scholars giving precedence to safety, and there is nothing equal to safety. السلامة لا تعدلها شيء. There's nothing equal to safety. Better to be safe than to be sorry, like they say. Better to be safe than to get involved in the fitan, to get burnt, and to go through headache, especially the fitan that involves the blood of the Muslims. And then you got blood on your hands, and then you realize later that you are wrong. Better to be safe than to be sorry. And how amazing is the statement of Ibn Asim, where he said, وَوَاجِبٌ فِي مُشْكِلَاتِ الْفَهْمِ تَحْسِينُ الظَّنَّ بِأَهْلِ الْعِلْمِ. It is obligatory in those things that are problematic to understand, that we have good thoughts of the people of knowledge. Those things that are problematic and heavy, that we have good thoughts of the people of knowledge. Then he says, and from amongst the things that are problematic is refuting zallat al-ulama, is refuting the errors of the scholars and the false statements of the people of innovation and the opposers. This is from the problematic affairs, and it's not from the affairs that, again, every time Dick and Harry talks about. It's got its people, it's got its rijal, it's got its rightful people that talk about it and discuss it. The only ones that speak about them is the firmly grounded scholars. A scholar made a mistake, it's not for you to go and say, yeah, that scholar made this mistake and I'm going to sort it out, I'm going to talk to him, I'm going to fix it, I'm going to do that, and if he doesn't listen to him, I'm going to do a 6-hour video on him and then a 10-hour video on him, and if he doesn't accept that, ila akhiri. That is not your level. Rather, this is for the firmly grounded scholars. This was clarified, he says, by Shatibi and Ibn Rajab and others. Then he says, so the safe, well-known path is to present it to the family. So this fitan and these affairs that are heavy and problematic, that you present it to the ulama, you give them the full picture, and then they give you an answer, and you stick to their statements. That you present it to the firmly grounded scholars, and then click to their statements in it. So that's the end of that chapter. The next chapter is the last chapter for today, so we can finish next week, is Al-Ma'qid Al-Sadis Ashar, chapter number 16. He says, توقير مجالس العلم وإجلال أوعيته, which is kind of connected to the previous chapter. He says, to venerate and honor the circles of knowledge and its vessels and its carriers. He says, فمجالس العلماء كمجالس الأنبياء. For indeed the circles of the scholars is like the circles of the prophets. Why? Because the scholars inherited the knowledge of the prophets. And so the Anbiya, the prophets, when they used to sit down and give fatwa and give direction and guidance, the ulama took that from them and they just conveyed that which they heard from and they received from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he says, قال سهل بن عبد الله التستري, he said, من أراد أن ينظر إلى مجالس الأنبياء فلينظر إلى مجالس العلماء. He says, يجيء الرجل فيقول يا فلان أي شيء تقول في رجل حلف على امرأته بكذا وكذا، فيقول طلقت امرأته يعني طلقت امرأتك. ويجيء آخر فيقول ما تقول في رجل حلف على امرأتي بكذا وكذا، فيقول ليس يحنث بهذا القول، وليس هذا إلا لنبي أو لعالم فاعرفوا لهم ذلك. He says that if you want to see the circles of the prophets, the Anbiya, then look no further than the circles of the scholars. If you want to see the circles of the Anbiya, the prophets, then look at the circles of the scholars. a man comes to them and he asks. He gives the example. He says, a man comes to them and asks. And he says, I said such and such about my wife. I said to her such and such and such and such. Am I divorced from her or not? And so he says, you are divorced from her. Then another man comes and he says, I said such and such and such and such to my wife. Am I divorced from her? He says, you're not divorced from her because of this statement. Doesn't lead to you being divorced from her, separate. So he says, no one can say this. No one can go to that conclusion, give these types of statements except for two people. A prophet and a scholar. Why the scholar? Because he's acting upon that knowledge that he took from the prophets. The knowledge of the Quran and the Sunnah. That this statement comes under this principle and this leads to divorce. And this one doesn't come under this. And this requires intention. This requires such and such, so it doesn't come under divorce. وهكذا. You can't do that except with knowledge. Is that clear? And that shows you the importance of the ulama. Again, many a people, even the people that insult them and curse them and talk bad about them and make them look, belittle them, when it comes to his problems, his private issues, he said something, is he divorced or not divorced, is his money halal or not halal, he curses them 24/7. But when he's got the issue, where does he go? Where's the first place? He has to go to a scholar. That's sufficient to show you the high station and the importance of the ulama. So he says, فعلى طالب العلم أن يعرف لمجالس العلم حقها فيجلس فيها جلسة الأدب ويصغي إلى الشيخ ناظرا إليه فلا يلتفت عنه من غير ضرورة ولا يضطرب لضجة يسمعها ولا يعبث بيديه أو رجليه ولا يستند بحضرة شيخه ولا يتكئ على يده ولا يكثر التنحنح والحركة ولا يتكلم مع جاره وإذا عطس خفض صوته وإذا تثاءب ستر فمه بعد رده جهده. He says, so it is upon a student to give the circles of knowledge its due right. So earlier we mentioned some of the adab of the student with regards to his teacher specifically. Now he's talking about some of the adab in the circle of knowledge, and some of it is again towards the teacher, but this is in the circle of knowledge. He says, so it's upon a student to give the circles of knowledge its due right. How? Number one, he says, so he sits in them, in the circles of knowledge, with respect, in a respectful manner. Number two, he listens carefully to the shaykh whilst looking at him. He does not look away from him. He does not look at other things. He does not turn away from him without a necessity. He does not become distracted by a sound that he hears. He hears a bang at the end over there, or some kid running over there, and he looks, what's going on over there? He doesn't get distracted. That's from the adab. He does not play with his hands nor his feet. From the stories in that regard is that Yahya ibn Yahya al-Andalusi, Yahya ibn Yahya that came from Andalus, he came all the way from Spain, came to Medina to study with Imam Malik. And one day, Imam Malik was with his students in the circle of knowledge, and Yahya ibn Yahya was sitting there. And elephants were walking by in Medina. And elephants are unheard of. You don't see elephants in Medina. So elephants were going by outside of the masjid, and all the people, hi, elephants, elephants, everyone got up to see. All the students got up to go and see the elephants. Except for Yahya ibn Yahya. He's still looking at Imam Malik. So he says, Imam Malik said to him, why didn't you get up to go see the elephants like the rest of the students? He says, Sheikh, I didn't come from all the way from Spain to go and look at some elephants. I came to seek knowledge with you. And so Imam Malik highly respected him for that, and gave him special concern in inayah after that. And he became from the most well-known scholars to narrate the book of Muwatta. Imam Malik was Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi al-Andalusi, from the most famous riwayah narration of the book of Muwatta Malik. That's how he was in class. He wasn't distracted by elephants, no by no noise, no by the revving of a car, no by anything. So, فَلْنَكُونُ كَذَلِكَ. Let's be like that. We come here seeking knowledge, seeking knowledge is an act of worship. Sitting in the circles of knowledge is an act of worship. So being sincere and try to apply these adab inshallah ta'ala. He says, he does not become distracted by a sound he hears. He does not play with his hands nor feet. He does not recline in the presence of the shaykh, nor does he lean on his hand. And this is the thing that you see the most. You go to a lesson, I don't want to do it, but you see a student sitting the lesson and he just lies flat down on the floor. There's a teacher there. It's from Su'ul Adab. And likewise, putting your feet out, your 2 feet out, like that, in front of the teacher. It's not from the good manners to do that. And if a person has to stretch their feet and the likes, like the brother got cramp, how's the cramp going? Good, yeah? Then if there's a necessity, then there's no problem. Like if it's a long sitting, 2 hours sitting, 3 hours sitting, that you stretch your legs to that direction or the likes, there's no problem with that. But without necessity, there's no need, then it's not from good manners. He does not continuously clear his throat nor move around plentifully. So he's in a lesson, he goes if there's something wrong with him, there's no problem, but he does it. That shows you like, Shaykh, the lesson's taking too long, hurry up. It shows impatience. It's kind of rude, it's interrupting the lesson. But obviously if someone can't control it, then maybe they should put their hand up and leave, maybe clear their throat or drink some water or the likes. طيب. If he sneezes, he does not speak with the person next to him. Bismillah, this exists a lot as well. In a lesson, and the student goes to others. Sheikh's right there in front of you. It's very rude. That's very rude. From the adab of sitting in the circle of knowledge, that you don't speak to anyone. You don't speak to the one next to you. Okay? If you have a question, you miss something, don't say, what's the last thing that you caught? No, I don't know. What did he write? I wrote. He said, kada. Just make some space after the lesson. Right, look, in this part here, I missed this. Can I see your notes? That's enough after the lesson. That's part of revision. Likewise, and this occurs a lot as well, picking up the phone in the class is very, very rude. Goes against the adab. In a class, it happens all over the world still. The mashayikh, especially the shaykh, the author, he always picks on it. If he sees someone doing that, he will correct them in the middle of the class. So you're in the class, phone rings, goes. Well, there's 2 types of people. There's the loud one that goes, hello, yeah, I'm in class. Well, you're outside. Alright, I'll see you later, inshallah, I'll see you later. He goes back in, as if nothing happened, goes back to that. The sheikh's teaching this, you're distracting the other students, you're interrupting their listening, they can't hear properly. That's the loud one. Then there's the one that tries to keep it quiet. Hello. Even that, it distracts other students and is rude. And the sheikh, the author, would always, if he saw someone on the phone, he would tell them, get off the phone. If you have to pick it up, it's an emergency, or it's your parents calling, put your hand up, get out the lesson, pick it up outside the lesson. If you have to pick it up, seek permission, go out the lesson, pick it up and come back. Okay? That's the best way to do it. Then he says, if he sneezes, he lowers his voice. If he yawns, he covers his mouth after trying his utmost to prevent it. That's just from basic adab. Then he says, وينضم إلى توقير مجالس العلم إجلال أوعيته التي يحفظ فيها وعمادها الكتب فاللائق بطالب العلم صون كتابه وحفظه وإجلاله والاعتناء به فلا يجعله صندوقا يحشوه بودائعه ولا يجعله بوقا وإذا وضعه بلطف وعناية. He says that from the manners likewise that comes to honoring the circles of knowledge is to venerate the vessels, the containers of knowledge. And the main container of knowledge today is books, where it's preserved, and the main one is books. So what is befitting for a student of knowledge is that a person safeguards and he looks after his book, number 1. Number 2, he takes great concern in preserving it. Number 3, he holds it in high esteem and takes great care of it. The books. Why? The book has in there, for example, if it's a Quran, the speech of Allah, or a hadith, or the speech of the ulama, or the speech of Allah with the speech of the Prophet ﷺ. This book is a book of knowledge, right? It's got statements of Allah Azza wa Jalla and statements of the Prophet ﷺ. Now, from respect is to look after it, to protect it, to preserve it, to not let any harm come towards it, but also that he does not treat it like a box where he stores things that are extra. You know, some people, they have their normal regular books, a history book, especially people that have money. They don't ever read the book, but they just use it to put money inside here. Or back in the day, phone number you write it down, you put it inside here. It became like a store cupboard, extra storage. That's not how you treat the books of ilm. Likewise, he does not treat it like a trumpet. I don't know what the Shaykh means by this. Maybe it's to store things or the likes. And if he puts it down, then he does so with gentleness and care. Likewise, what you can add to that is that you don't place it on the ground, the floor, next to your feet, especially in the lesson. This happens a lot, and we've mentioned this before, that it's from the adab to raise the book, especially the mushaf. You don't put it on the floor, you raise it higher. And that even when you have it, that you don't, for example, let's say there's a shelf, and then you have, for example, all those books, that's tafsir, so that's alright. But let's say that was an English book, if you can see the shelf behind you. The top, let's say there was just English books, for example, the Seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, history of the Khulafa al-Rashideen at the top, and lower than it, all the rest is Quran. It's not befitting. Quran should be the highest. It's from adab, for veneration of the speech of Allah Azza wa Jal. The Quran should always be high. So it should never go on the floor. Likewise, just general books, you shouldn't put it next to your feet. You shouldn't make your feet face the books. So I have the book here, and I put my feet towards it. It's from bad manners. It's not from ta'zeem al-ilm. Even, for example, if you're at home and you have a maktaba, let's say you have a book shelf, you have books inside there, and you're sitting on your sofa, and you're lying down on your sofa, no problem. But which way are your feet facing? They're facing where the shelf of books are. It's from bad manners. You should have ta'zeem al-ilm. You're facing your feet to the speech of Allah Azza wa Jalla and the speech of the Messenger. Put the shelf somewhere where you don't face your feet, or turn around if you can, or move the sofa. Or if you're sleeping like that, turn around. وهكذا. Al-muhim, that you venerate and respect knowledge in all of its forms. That you don't throw the book. You don't put it somewhere that's not befitting. You have it in your bag. These books, for example, now you put it in your bag. You go to the car, whether you put it in the car, you put it on the floor next to your feet. That's not from veneration. Ta'zeem. Ta'zeem is that you put it at least on your seat, on the seat, or in the trunk, or at the top, at the back. Don't put it next to your feet. That's disrespectful. Is that clear? That's from the ta'zeem of ilm. And this has an athar, this has a ta'thir, an effect in your seeking, in the blessing of the knowledge that you seek. That you show respect to knowledge, knowledge will respect you and honor you. If you don't show no respect to knowledge, then knowledge will not respect you. Allah will not put no barakah in it. What barakah will be there be to a person that puts his feet next to the Quran? Allah musta'an. He says that, he rounds up, and we round up with the statement. He says, one day Ishaq ibn Rahuya, and as a side benefit, Ishaq ibn Rahuya was from the contemporary scholars that lived the same time as Imam Ahmed, and there's two ways to pronounce his name, his last name. The grammarians, the Nahwiyun, the people that give ihtimam to the Arabic language, they say Sibaway, Rahaway, Ishaq ibn Rahaway. Like in Ahl Hadith, the people of Hadith that do ishtighal with Hadith, they read it as Rahuya. Okay? Is that clear? Minjaway, Manjuya. Just two different ways of writing. Inshallah, you guys, Ahl Hadith. Ishaq ibn Rahuya, and the English is in accordance to that. The translation is in accordance to that. So one day Ishaq ibn Rahuya threw a book that was in his hand through it. So Imam Ahmed saw him, became angry, and he said to him, is that how you deal with the speech of the Salihin, the speech of the righteous, that you throw it? Disrespectful. So he rebuked him for that. Then he says, ولا يتكئ على الكتاب أو يضعه عند قدميه وإذا كان يقرأ فيه على شيخ رفعه عن الأرض وحمله بيديه. He says that he does not lean on top of the books, nor does he place it near his feet. Exactly what we were mentioning a second ago. He does not lean on top of the books. That happens a lot as well. So you have the books here, and the person's in a tea shop or coffee shop or food, and they've got their books with them after the lesson. So if you go to Mat'am right now, they go like this. I'm not doing it, by the way, but just to show you. They lean on it like that, or any other way, or they put food on top of it. This is from disrespect. You shouldn't lean on top of it. You shouldn't place anything on top of it. Nor does he place it near his feet, as we said. And if he reads it upon a shaykh, if he's reading on the shaykh, he shouldn't put it on the floor. Rather, he lifts it up and holds it with his two hands. So some people, they will read and they will make it be on the floor and they're reading from it like that. Rather, you should lift it up and read it whilst you're holding it with your hands. This is all connected to the circles of knowledge and how to deal with the books. So in this lesson today, not just this chapter, but today's lesson generally, we talked about some of the adab that a student should have with regards to his teacher, and if he makes a mistake as well. Likewise, some of the adab with regards to the circle of knowledge when you're sitting in the circle of knowledge, and some of it includes the teacher. And lastly, some of the adab with the vessels, the things that knowledge is carried with, mainly books, how you should treat it. And so it's an immense benefit, inshallah ta'ala. We ask Allah to make us from those that act upon that which we learn. Any questions before we round up?
Is it from the knowledge of, is it from the manners of books that you have wudu when you touch them?
If you're going to be reading something about Allah and His Messenger, anything to do with religion, it's better to do wudu when you're doing it. So that's from the manners generally. Attending the lesson and reading ilm is wudu. But the Quran specifically is haram. You're not allowed to touch the mushaf and read from the mushaf whilst you do not have wudu. As for reading it without wudu from your memorization, that's allowed. And so that's with regard. A second. Sorry. Oh, listen, Uncle. Yeah, go.
Sheikh, what about if you haven't got wuzu and you're listening in the car or headphones at workplace or something like that?
That's fine. If you listen, there's no problem. But if you're seeking it, if you're reading it and the likes, and you're able, first of all, generally speaking, it's good to have wudu all the time. And there's a hadith that mentions no one preserves their wudu except for a believer. Whenever he breaks, he makes wudu again. Throughout the day, as long as he's awake in the day, that he tries to have wudu all the time is a sign of a believer. No one preserves his wudu except for a mu'min. So that's generally speaking. And it's more specific when you're involved in any act of worship. Like there's some that you can't do without, like reciting the Quran from the Mus'haf or praying and the likes. But there's some things is extra, it's better to. So if you're involved in revision of the Quran, listening to it in a lesson or the likes, it's better to have it. But it's not haram. It doesn't invalidate. It's better to. Okay. If you don't have wudu and you're in a car and you're doing work and you can't make wudu right now and you like, should I listen to it? Should I not listen? I don't have wudu. Listen to it. No problem. Just listen to it. You're in act of worship. It's better. But I'm saying generally it's good to have wudu all the time. Any other questions? Last question. Oh, sorry. Huh?
What does tarnish mean?
Tarnish means to ruin. To ruin.
You mentioned that there's a sheikh who says he needs to complete a book in fiqh every year. When he says complete, does he mean memorize it?
No. I don't know. Maybe to study. I don't think memorize. You can't memorize the big books. But to study it, to read it, to revise it once a year.
Let's see, you drop a book, either the Quran or a book like this. Are you allowed to, like, let's say, kiss it or?
Hassan's good question. If you drop the Quran or the likes, are you allowed to kiss it? It's not from the sunnah to kiss it. Kiss it, astaghfirullah, it's accident. But it's not sunnah to kiss it or the likes. It's ma'thur, it says that some of the Salaf did it, but some says the narrations are weak. So it's better not to do it, especially the Mus'haf. But at the same time, because there's some narrations, even though it might be weak, it's better, you shouldn't be harsh if someone does it. Some people, they might be used to doing it all the time. Shouldn't be harsh on them, rebuking them, because there's some things that they probably read from those narrations, but it's not sunnah. You can't say it's sunnah or recommended to do so.
You mentioned not falling to extreme when listening attentively.
Not listening attentively. We said
When
praising.
when listening attentively. In chapter 14.
It says not going extreme in listening attentively.
Yeah.
No, I think he meant. Does it say that in the book?
No, I wrote it down.
I think it's
Right.
praising. That you don't go to extremism when you're praising him. صح ولا لا? Double check.
Is on the part where
If he speaks, you hold him in high esteem, but do not go into extremism with him. Yani you're holding him in high esteem.
When he speaks.
So when he speaks, you hold him in high esteem, like you respect his speech and you honor him and you listen attentively. So in that high esteem when you listen to him, but don't go to extremism in high esteem. And don't raise him. غلو. طيب. بالله التوفيق. Next week Sunday is our last session inshallah ta'ala. We also have the Tuesday Aqidah Wasitiyah last session in Masjid Tarbiyah. Inshallah ahlan wa sahlan wa bikum. I'm gonna run inshallah, so I excuse you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Oh, I excuse myself, not excuse you.
Is the
Yes, exit.